Welcome to Lewis University's Career Discovery Podcast, where we discuss the dynamics of careers in the 21st century. I am your host, Nina Novacek, the Assistant Director of the Graduate Admissions Office, and today we are speaking with our guest, Dr. Michael Cherry, Associate Professor and Program Director for the Bachelor of Arts in Organizational Leadership at Lewis University. Mike, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This is a great opportunity.
Wonderful, wonderful. So we wanted to talk to you about the Organizational Leadership Program, and in the graduate program, that offers 5 concentrations, one of them being organizational management. Can you give us a better explanation of what is organizational management?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because I think there is some confusion. We have organizational leadership, which is the degree, and then you can pursue this concentration in organizational management. So it really speaks to our thought within our program that there is a difference between leadership and management. And there's, of course, zillions of definitions around leadership as opposed to management. And so, for us, we think of leadership as essentially a relationship. It's a connection of someone to others. And that leadership, as distinct from management, looks at a shared vision, defining values and encouraging and being an example of those values. And then this idea, and it's hard certainly as a quantifiable or a metric, inspiration of some sort, versus management, which really is around promoting efficiency and effectiveness. And many times that can be accomplished through establishment and the monitoring of processes and procedures, and then, of course, dealing with the unexpected. Right. So in terms of the question that you asked, which was, what is organizational management? It is a little bit different than a lot of our core curriculum because we dive into some more of the details, some of the more tactical and how should we say, tangible nature of management. And so, for instance, I think it's reflected in the courses that we have. So within organizational management, of course, we talk about building teams, and that course is very specific around roles and responsibilities. How do we develop a group, get people in the right places based on their strengths? There's planning strategically, so the very tactical and sometimes systematic ways that we can create a good strategy that can lead our organizations. We have, of course, discussion and look at organizational cultures and systems. So one of the topics in there is structure. What's the hierarchy? What's the organizational structure? How are we creating an organization to be successful, to be efficient, to perhaps be effective, based around the roles that people play, the departments we have, the divisions we have within the organization. And finally, we have finance as organizational text, which dives into the financial aspects of running an organization. So there is a cross there between the inspirational, the shared vision, the values of leadership, but this concentration spends a little bit more time on some of the tactical and more pragmatic needs for management.
Interesting. Very good. Okay. So you mentioned leadership. What types of leadership styles are needed, do you think, to have a positive impact on the organizational performance, and why?
Well, that's a big one. That's a big question.
Kind of a double question.
A little
sorry.
bit. No, that's all right. It's a big question because it's leadership. And I think the greatest example of our fascination as just people with leadership is you do a quick Google search and you do leadership, and within a fraction of a second you have millions of hits around leadership. And so I think it's something that fascinates us in a variety of ways. We think of great leaders of the past, and historically, why do we still talk about queens and kings and titans of industry and even great captains of sports teams? It's just such a fascination. And given that, though, the challenges, around that question of what types of leadership have a positive impact. And there are so many leadership styles. I just went through a little list. The charismatic leadership, participative, servant leadership, situational, transformational, visionary. And those are all great. Any of those can have an impact, because if we come back to that definition we had earlier around leadership as a relationship, well, we need to have that tool, that skill, that approach that we're taking as a leader match with those folks that we're leading, those followers, that relationship. So any of those can be effective. And perhaps coming out of that, at least in my mind, it's a logical conclusion that the leadership that can have a positive impact on an organization is flexible leadership that's fluent in different styles. And that's what our program tries to achieve. Presents all these different leadership styles and ask students, how can you apply these? How can you use these tomorrow at work after you finish class, or your discussion board post for the week, or whatever it happens to be? Where's the application? How can we practice this? How can we do this? And that's one of the exciting things about teaching folks in our program, because 97% probably are working full-time in some capacity. And so there's a lab component that we wouldn't really call a lab, but it is. You're going back to work. Your organizations or your nonprofits, and you're seeing leaders, right?
Right.
You're seeing folks in action, and you can observe them. You're in action. You're leading your department. You're leading the youth group. Whatever you happen to be doing, there's a leadership component. So our hope is that we can help folks become more fluent and flexible in a variety of leadership styles, so they can essentially have those the tools on their tool belt. Mm-hmm. Is that the right tools on their tool belt? And coming towards that, I think maybe it gets to our approach to a certain extent, is that in our program, if you think of a 4-quadrant model, which I joke that maybe it's unexplainable if you can't put it into a 4-quadrant model, but you have a wonderful emotional intelligence model that I think really speaks to leadership development, as there's a combination of knowing and awareness and doing. And so we become aware through self-awareness. In so many of our classes, it's leadership assessments, it's exploration of our own leadership. But just knowing that, seeing it, being aware of it really isn't enough. We got to do something with it. And so that's where the doing comes in. So what's the self-management? What are we going to commit to doing? What's our development plan? And since we're talking about leadership, coming back to it's a relationship again, that sort of theme maybe we're developing here. How do we connect with others? So that social awareness piece. How do we meet others where they are? How do we meet their needs? How perhaps can we break barriers for them so they can be more successful in our leadership roles? We can see that, we can be aware of it, but again, not enough, right? We have to do something with it, and that's where relationship management comes in.
Okay.
And so our program should lead folks through this great and wonderful exploration of self and how that connects with other people around them in this world of leadership,
right,
and team development, and whatever those leadership roles are that they have.
I like the flexibility aspect of it. That's changed quite a bit over the years.
Right.
25 years ago, you didn't see near as much flexibility in leadership as you do today.
Right. There's an interesting work by an author, Avery. It was 2004. A book where they it's kind of grand, I suppose, leadership eras. And in different leadership eras, there was certainly a lot less flexibility. If we think, I think the first era that Avery defined was antiquity to the 70s, where it was more command and control.
Right.
But that's still a vital leadership style. I mean, once in a while we just say, look, this is the direction we're going, and we need to go there.
Right.
And everybody needs to be on board with it, and you need to do this, and you need to do that, and we got to do it. So certainly a tool that we can still have. And then it moves forward into a number of other eras. Leadership paradigms. So the classical, that would be the first one, the classical that we just talked about, command and control. And it's interesting, Avery defines the source of follower commitment, which if we translate to now, we talk about employee engagement and how engaged people are, right? But in that classical time, the follower commitment was fear, rewards, and punishment.
Right.
I mean, those things, not necessarily something we want to do all the time, but in maybe a short blast, we have to do that to, perhaps to get something done. Then Avery suggests in kind of the 70s to the 80s, there was this transactional approach, which was, as it would explain, a give and a take, right?
Right.
Here's something for you, you kind of come back. And so, but the followers are getting a little bit more influence here because it's negotiated rewards. It's our agreement with each other, our connection with each other. And, perhaps there really isn't a big need for vision, though. It's just, what am I getting? And, it doesn't matter what the vision is, as long as there's this, we're each getting something. It's good. And then Avery suggests the mid-1980s to 2000-ish is more visionary. And the basis of our leadership is inspiration, right? What's the vision? What are we striving towards? And sharing the vision. And this is where we saw a lot of great leaders that were just so charismatic.
Right.
I immediately think of Iacocca from Chrysler.
Right.
He was so charismatic, and yes, we can do this, and some questions are around sustainability, but nevertheless, and then the real is that this we, and so that vision is important, but the followers are even contributing more to it versus the classical, which was the leader just set the vision and I either did it and got a reward or not, and I was punished.
Right.
And then finally, perhaps now in our modern day, and of course it's such a modern term in my mind, the organic leadership characteristic, right? And the idea is mutually, us together, we make sense together of what's going on. There's shared values, there's truly a shared vision, shared accountability. And it's collaboration, it's collective. People want to be in a leadership where it isn't, you do this, but how do you think that worked? What do you suggest? Here's perhaps where I think we should head. What do you think?
Right.
So more coaching, more questions as opposed to a statement, maybe in a tangible leadership behavior. And certainly, I think Avery presents a real neat paradigms of leadership. And however, in my mind, maybe that comes back to that flexibility. Here's different tools we need to use. I mean, there can be that command and control. There needs to be transaction. There needs to be that forward direction setting, but there also needs to be, how do we do this together at different times and different needs. So coming back to that flexibility, and that's what we hope is through the exploration within our classes of all these different leadership techniques and with organizational culture, a little bit of research, team development, assessing our own leadership skills, we can develop. We're going to have preferences, but we can develop more fluency and flexibility to work with different styles.
Okay. So now that we ended that with collaboration, how important is group development in an organization's performance?
That is probably critical.
Mm-hmm.
There's a quote that I love, kind of an inspirational one. I'm going to use it. It's from Ralph Waldo Emerson. And he says, and I think it's fascinating, maybe speaks to importance. Every great and commanding moment in the annals of the world is the triumph of some enthusiasm in the spirit of teamwork. Oh, I think it's so grand, Right. I mean, my gosh. Yeah, so it's critical. And for a variety of reasons. I mean, we kind of think about the needs for teams, and as we see, work become more complex for whatever reason. Maybe it's just the nature of it. I had a connection with a leader who's blockchain and Bitcoin in moving that into a different industry, which seems to work. It just seems wildly complex, and the white paper on it, I got about 5 pages into it, and I got to start over. So the work itself, her work is very complex, and we probably see that more and more as work takes on different elements. It becomes more complex. So perhaps teams are helpful in that because of different perspectives on the challenges and opportunities, and that also could be demanded by the marketplace.
Right.
And so, some other reasons for teams that we would that would kind of fit here. We're trying to increase productivity, right? So instead of one person doing everything, well, we can spread on more hands, right? But that's been around for generations. Why do we do that? But quality too. We may be holding each other accountable for higher quality within the work. We hope it would reduce costs, maybe more people, higher quality, fewer returns. We can do things faster, so we can reduce costs. There's that speed, innovation, facilitate change, and then certainly there's the benefits of the members, coming back to that engagement piece. To answer, coming back to that question is, the group development, I think fits maybe to a bit of a mantra, and it's something we don't say a whole lot, but I think we believe as a program is through better leadership and improving our leadership, we can create better teams. And this is kind of grand, but I certainly believe it. I think through better teams within the different places where we work and volunteer and such, we create better communities. Mm-hmm. And so better leadership, better teams, better communities. And in my mind, that's just almost a pathway.
Right.
Of some sort.
Right. No, I agree. And to me, it's also very important, too, because teams have changed over the years significantly. Years ago, teams would be all in the same office, and now they could be globally. You could have team members that you never even meet,
right.
So understanding them and knowing how to develop them is significant, and it definitely allows for growth on that. So, all right, very interesting. Mike, can you give us some examples of companies that have implemented successful organizational change management efforts and realization of their desired benefits?
Yeah, it's a challenging one, because so often in the press we like to talk about the failure.
Right, I know.
When the company didn't do very well. And so there might be more examples of that. We think of the company with poor ethics. We can go back to the Enrons and the Wells Fargos and those sorts of things, which certainly change was kind of put upon them, much to their own doing. Right. Shame on them. But there's those more negative examples. I think positive examples. One that kind of struck me, and as I was really thinking about, one that came to mind almost last minute was the March of Dimes. Yeah. How cool is that? As a organization, you've achieved your goal to a certain extent where you almost put yourself out of business.
Right.
And so, there's a great example of a company that, had to pivot and change for very positive reasons. We've solved this polio thing, more or less.
Right.
But we've and so now what are we going to do? That was our guiding star. That was our our northern light, so to speak. And now what? And it certainly have adjust and change to a wonderful organization that continues with just such great value and special meaning and all those different things that come from a great organization. Another one that's closer to home, because I just loved this magazine as a kid, was National Geographic. I loved it. It was a magazine, but now they got the TV show. Now they've sort of stayed to their core to a certain extent, but they've adjusted with the times as readership decreases in the magazine, which still is a flagship, but the sponsorship of exploration, the website, the social media, the edgy shows, Attack of the whatever, and those types of things, which you wouldn't often National Geographic just seems like kind of this old stated buttoned up organization, yet there's this kind of
it's so true stuff. Though, because when you would just read the magazine before, there was sort of an element of, did that really happen? But when you actually watch National Geographic and you're watching them out there, you're thinking, wow, they really have spent an enormous amount of money on exploration and have given so much to science and the environment. It's incredible. That's good examples. I would not have thought those too, as far as organizational change, but significant.
Well, Apple too. I mean, we think of them as, whether the first $1 trillion, all this success, but I mean, granted, it was a computer company, so but then they changed. There are all sorts of different ways you could have your personal music.
Right.
Suddenly, the iPod came and took over, and then what did that lead to? And it keeps again, one of those ones where there's probably some common threads. There's some staying close to our core, but changing and evolving. And there was a time when Apple stock was $10 a share, and now what is it? It's like gulp.
Yeah.
Nokia, another one, which was fascinating. I didn't know the history of them, but they started out, at one point in their history. Of course, I like these examples because they're more historical. I mean, we go back a ways. I mean, 1800s for some of these companies, and Nokia was making rubber boots.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
And it's just kept growing and different, and adjusting to the times. And now one of the largest producers of the mobile device.
Right.
And so there's a variety. IBM has this history.
Right.
Of,
IBM has definitely changed.
What have they done and changed, and have had to adjust. And so there's a lot of those, and but I suppose a second part of that question is why or how have they done it? And it's through the better management of change. And Kotter talks about that as John Kotter is really considered the person on change, and it's certainly not easy. There's a model. There's 8 steps. You can go through look, here's the 8 steps. It's hard to do, but first, that a sense of urgency as one, and the guiding coalition. Who are those champions to help promote that? And knowing a bit of the history of these organizations, there's been those people. The vision and strategy. I've had the pleasure over the years of doing a lot of team assessment, and usually those assessments are in preparation for what we call an offsite, or a workshop of sorts. So the team's going to get together as a team to develop themselves and work on some real work. And one of the questions that over the years we've tried to consistently ask in those is, what would be the best use of our time when we get together in the room? And two of the answers that, actually there's 3 that come out real consistently. Better definition of vision. Where are we headed? What's our, I kind of use that goofy analogy, the North Star, right? Mm-hmm. Where are we headed to? What's our charter? What's our purpose as being one? A second one that comes out very consistently is, what is my role and my responsibility as a member of this team or group? And often tied to, well, how does that support this vision, right?
Right.
How does it support this endpoint? And a third, doesn't come out all the time, but frequently is just, how do we want to do our work? What are our values, our underlying values? Sometimes it doesn't come out because teams have been together a while. They're aware of those values. They may not be able to articulate the assumptions behind them, but they kind of know, how we want to do our work. But, vision, roles and responsibility, and values are those 3 things. And so vision and strategy is a third step. The fourth, Kotter suggests communicating the change vision. So we've got to tell people about it. We need to articulate that, be very clear. As leaders, we need to empower action, and certainly broad-based action we got to change. So we got to do something different. And so how do we empower? How do we break barriers towards that? Certainly in any change effort, in any of these organizations, they've had to, let's get some quick wins, some short term, because we want to gain momentum, right? So we change some things, success, change some more success, and we just kind of that snowball effect, right? Going downhill. We want to consolidate some of those gains. That helps produce the more change. So that's the 7th step. And finally number 8, which certainly in the model makes sense. I don't know, in the real world of work, it says anchor new approaches to the culture. So we want to anchor those certainly, but there's a feeling that, we're probably continually changing. We'll anchor on certain things, but certainly we can't suddenly say, oh, we've done it.
Right. And we can sit
and we
back.
Sit there.
Yeah.
And then, then what?
Yeah, right.
Then the next whatever happens, the next change in the market or something. So I suppose the hope is if a group goes through these models of change, they've learned them. So they've become a learning organization, right? That it's not uncomfortable.
Well, I think you kind of covered one of my last questions, was what were some of the key components that you believed caused these successes? And as you've given us the 8 points to successful change, I do like how you mentioned on one of the points of having the smaller successes first, because I think introducing any type of change to an organization is very scary, and sometimes employees have a tendency to push back because we're all like that. We like going in knowing what we need to do.
Right.
Change is scary, but if you have a few smaller degrees of success, and it gets people excited, and they realize, well, that wasn't too bad to get to this point, that wasn't too bad to get to this point, they're probably much more open to saying, all right, let's dive in now. Let's dive in. And it really gets the momentum going then, I think. And it gets everyone behind it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's when you mention that, I just think of, so often, whether it's, let's say it's March, and there's the basketball tournament, right? The March Madness.
March Madness, yeah.
You'll hear a coach, and it's bad to use a sport example because some people aren't really into it, but I'm always struck by, they say, well, we have to learn how to win. And, to get to that really the next level, to be a great team, we have to learn how to win these types of games or something like that. And I think it speaks to your point. We gotta get some small wins, right?
Right.
And boy, we kind of get that sense, we can do this. And you get another, and, in that sports analogy, a team that over the years you kind of think is significantly better than us as a team. And it's sometimes maybe it's just coach speak, but I think there's probably a grain of truth to it.
Sure.
And that kind of fits with your thought around, we got to build up, and we get a few things going, and we see we can do this, and there's maybe a little bit of that light at the end of the tunnel as more of a destination as opposed to the train coming at us. Right. So instead of getting run over, it's more on the positive end of, oh yeah, that's where we're headed. It gets a little brighter and a little brighter, and maybe also makes us a little bit more resilient too. Right.
True. That's true. Was there anything else that you wanted to maybe touch on about the organizational leadership program?
Sure. And I think one piece is specific to our conversation today, was around our concentration in organizational management. A wonderful concentration, but certainly a generalist concentration. Many students that come into our program that look to somewhat radically change their career may choose a different concentration. And I teach in the coaching program as well, our coaching, professional executive coaching concentration. And we see a lot of students coming out of different industries and deciding, what, I want to go into professional executive coaching. Mm-hmm. That's really a career change for many of them. We even have some folks that are retiring, and they decide, my retirement career is going to be in coaching. Right. It could be life coaching. There's so many different areas that they can go into. So organizational management may not lend itself as well to someone who wants to change a career. However, I suppose the and here, and it is a wonderful concentration for those who see their career pathway at their current organization. So they enjoy the culture, they enjoy the work, they're generally very well skilled in the work that they do. They have a very technical or a tactical work that they do, and they do well. And they see that their progression is into leadership. And so that organizational management concentration can really help them gain some skill set around those higher level managerial skills. And they'll have certainly the higher level leadership skills from the larger OL programs. Right. So, understanding the finances a little bit better, what's specifically around teams, the different aspects around, understanding their own leadership, and then that strategy. Because so often in working with leaders who are at that point of transition, I hear in assessing those leaders, I need them to be more strategic. That's what the boss is saying. Those leaders, supervisors are saying, I want them to be more strategic, but can be kind of ambiguous.
Right.
What does strategy mean? What does being strategic mean? Well, we can help with that. Strategic planning. What is the system? What is the process that can lead to an effective look at strategy for an organization? And so for those students who say, hey, I'm very comfortable. I like my organization. I see perhaps where my career pathway is within this organization. I think the organizational management concentration may just be right, the material, the content, the curriculum that they need at the time.
Okay. Good points. All right. Well, this has been quite interesting to learn a little bit more about this program and kind of getting into the weeds a little bit of what's covered. Dr. Cherry, we really thank you for your time that you've spent with us today on this Career Discovery podcast, and we hope you can come back again in the future for another podcast.
Thank you. Be a lot of fun.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.